Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the April edition of the Staff Wellness and Health Booster Sessions. Our topic this month is post-traumatic growth, and this is part one of a two-part series on the topic. My name is Chad Saxon, Communication Specialist with Shared Health, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Our presenter today is Carmel Watson, Organizational Assistant Specialist with Blue Cross Manitoba. We'll get to Carmel in a few seconds, but we just go over a few things before that. So as we all know, this has been a time of great change in our world. We have been forced to adjust how we conduct ourselves in the workplace, our homes, and with our social connections. These changes can sometimes feel overwhelming. To support the mental health and wellness of health system workers and the public, Mental Health and Addictions Shared Health has brought together skilled trainers from across the province to facilitate several booster sessions. In today's session, which as I mentioned is the first of a two-part series, you'll be introduced to the concept of post-traumatic growth. This is not merely a bouncing back to the level of functioning prior to a trauma, rather a sense of growth beyond pre-trauma functioning. In the first part of this series, we will learn more about post-traumatic growth and the stress response. And in the second part, on April 19th, we will identify ways you can enhance this growth and nurture the changes you've experienced. Following the presentation, we'll have a few minutes for questions. Also, this session is being recorded and will be made available as a streaming video on demand on Shared Health's on the health providers page. So I'll put a link for that into the chat so you're able to access that. But if you were to go to the Shared Health providers page, there is a mental health and wellness section that you'd be able to find that video as well. So with that, I will turn things over to Carmel for the presentation.
Great, thank you so much, Chad, and thank you for joining me for the session on post-traumatic growth. As already mentioned, I work for Manitoba Blue Cross, and we are very happy to be your provider for employee assistance benefits. What that means is that through your EAP benefits, you have short-term counseling available to you and your family members. We also offer other services, one of which is workshops and seminars. And today, so I'm here to present to you a shorter version of our seminar. In fact, I've split it into two parts as it's a pretty big topic. So let's see here. Let's quickly take a look at the overall agenda for the session, keeping in mind that it is split into two parts. So we'll only get through half of this today. We'll start by talking about the difference between resilience and post-traumatic growth. I want to introduce you to or remind you of the mental health continuum model. This is a lovely tool to help us check in with ourselves. We will then reflect on how we respond to stress. We'll talk about tips on self-care. And then lastly, we're going to talk about this idea of growth after trauma. So I'm going to ask you to share a little bit in the chat, and then Chad, perhaps you can share some of the answers out loud for us. So without assuming that any of us have actually bounced back from this experience, I want to know, so we're talking about, again, the last 3 years, the pandemic. I want to know what is the one thing that helped you adjust to the changes. So this could be your routine, your pets, exercise, anything. So if you don't mind sharing in the chat, I'll give people a few minutes to type their answers. And Chad, if you want to let me know some of the things that might be popping up, that'd be great.
Sure. So yeah, as Carmel mentioned, you can enter them into the question section. So we've had a couple already come in. One here, my son and husband. Obviously, a family would certainly play a very big role in all of everything that's going on in the last while.
Yeah.
Just another mentioning family as well. Anyone has any others they'd like to share? I know, just sort of almost kind of an extension of that family aspect. I think, you know, community, having a community, just being your family is obviously part of that, but also I think having the, you know, your community of supports has been a pretty big key in this.
Absolutely. I mentioned routine, and for me, I think that's a big one for me, is I, throughout those last 3 years, is just kind of being able to depend on the things that I do day to day to get me through. You know, to know what to expect is helpful when we were living in a time where we didn't know what to expect. So routine was a big one.
Yeah, We have somebody noted having a hobby for this person. It was reading. Somebody noted webinars with a smiley face. So I'm not sure if that's meant to be a bit tongue in cheek, but
Yeah.
checking in with friends via phone on a regular basis, positive relationships and self-care, and having access to outdoor spaces such as a seasonal campsite, which that's always great to be able to get out into nature.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, lots of different ways that people have adjusted to the changes, and we all have to, we did have to figure it out, right? It's important to note that for some people, these changes happened really quite quickly, whereas for other people, it took time, right? A lot of people didn't think that this pandemic would last as long as it did. And so maybe didn't feel like it was necessary to make intentional adjustments. I think I was like that. I was like, oh yeah, no, this isn't a thing, and or it'll be over really quickly. And then realize very quickly, or not very quickly, realize that nope, that's not the case. And so needing to figure out how are we going to get through. And that's a lot of the reasons why we saw people struggle at different points throughout the last few years. Just get to my next slide here. So let's first talk about resilience, as this is something that most of us might be a bit more familiar with, this term. We've heard resilience, and I know I have heard people say they are tired of hearing about resilience. It is a word, that and pivot, and like there's a few words that people are really tired of hearing about. But I wanted to just talk about the difference here. So resilience refers to the idea that we can bounce back after going through a challenging period. So it's the ability to recover from or adjust from misfortune or change. And now let's talk about post-traumatic growth. Okay, so post-traumatic growth is a concept that is similar to resilience, but as you see on the slide, distinct from it. So this idea was developed in the 1990s, so fairly new concept by two psychologists, and it can be defined as positive change that occurs in the aftermath of struggle with a major life crisis or traumatic event. This can be a wide variety of experiences, one of which includes the pandemic and the impacts over the last few years. Now, typically post-traumatic growth develops following a physical or psychological trauma that is disruptive enough to our perspectives and values that it stimulates reassessment and rebuilding of psychological and philosophical beliefs and approach to living. So it really shakes us up. So such traumas often force affected individuals to recognize that they're not invincible, consider what they do and do not have control of, and reassess their personal and professional priorities. So I would say a lot of people have done some of this reflecting and really still can't believe that this has happened, right? I think a lot of us will stay like, wow, this has been wild, right? Can you believe that this has happened? So with post-traumatic growth, we're talking about a transformation, a challenge to people's core beliefs that causes them to become different than they were before the event or the trauma. As you can see on this slide, post-traumatic growth is going to look different for each person, and it would be described as a process that might result in such things as development of deeper relationships, openness to new possibilities, greater sense of personal strength. What else do we have on here? A stronger sense of spirituality and a greater appreciation of life. So we're going to look at those in more detail a little bit later in the presentation. So post-traumatic growth suggests that people can emerge from trauma or adversity having achieved positive personal growth rather than just returning to that pre-existing state. So that's the big difference there. Oops, what happened there? Okay, there we go. Are we back on? No, it keeps switching. What are you seeing, Chad? Sorry.
I see your app. We've got the app up.
Okay, so now do you?
Yeah, now you're back to the continuum there.
Yeah, I don't know why it kept kicking me out there for a second, but I wanted to introduce you to this model, or perhaps again, you are familiar with it. It's called the mental health continuum model and allows us to recognize that we all have mental health and that we can easily shift back and forth on this continuum, depending on what's going on inside of us as well as around us. So if we quickly take a look at it, you see that arrow at the top that kind of shows you that you can shift back and forth. So healthy, maybe you've got a good sense of humor, you know, your sleeping patterns are pretty normal, you're socially active, physically active, normal mood fluctuations, kind of can take things in stride. Reacting in the yellow there, perhaps we're maybe a bit more irritable or impatient, nervous, might be experiencing procrastination, which again might be normal for some of us. So again, you've got to keep in mind that this is out of our norm, okay? Maybe trouble sleeping at this point, some muscle tensions, headaches, low energy. Then into the orange here, injured. We might be experiencing some anger, anxiety, maybe a bit of a negative attitude or poor performance or concentration. Our sleep might be restless or disturbed, that increased aches and pains, fatigue, maybe an increase in alcohol use or gambling or other substances. Then we move into the last category there, and this is where we're really seeing some struggles. We might be really angry. We might start to feel physically sick, constantly tired, can't fall asleep or stay asleep, can't perform our duties. So you see that this is like I said, a continuum, right? Back and forth here. Now, again, I'm going to encourage you to do a bit of a reflection throughout this presentation. It's about reflecting. And so I want you to sort of take a look and ask yourself, where do you think you are on this continuum right now? Again, feel free to share in the chat if you'd like, or you can just make a note to yourself on this. So yeah, you're gonna reflect not only where you are today, but I want you to reflect on where you've been in the last year, in the last 3 years, even in the last week. Because as you reflect on that, I also want you to take a moment to reflect on where other people in your life, so that might be your friends, your families, your coworkers, where they might be on this continuum. Now, the reason that I ask you to do that is it's really important for us to recognize not only where we are, but that this can change, okay? Now, I've seen a really great presentation with this continuum. There's another model where at the bottom, it actually gives you action points on how you can help yourself shift back and forth on this continuum. So things that you can do to help yourself shift. So that's what I love about this is we're all somewhere on here, and we also have the ability to help ourselves shift. I don't know, Chad, is there anything in the chat that to be shared if anyone wanted to share where they're at or?
Yes, we had one person noted reacting/injured. So that was the only one we've had so far. So if anyone else wanted to
and like I said, or just take a note for yourself.
We also had somebody note somewhere in between healthy and reacting.
Mm-hmm. And so it's good to take a look at this from time to time, because then we can also track where we shifted, right? And maybe that is, we can start to connect dots, right? Like, okay, so today I'm feeling, you know, healthy, reacting, you know, and then next week I'm feeling more in that injured. So what has changed? What's going on? What can I do? What helps me to shift one way, or what might cause me to shift another way? So it's a really great model to take a look at. Okay. So we're going to briefly talk about typical reactions to trauma. Just like the slide says, people respond to trauma in a variety of ways, and most people don't develop long-standing struggles with their mental health. So I'm going to share some common reactions on the next slide, and perhaps you'll notice some of your own reactions. So these are some of the reactions that people often report, and some of which I have definitely experienced myself within the last 3 years. So fear and worry about your own health or the health of your loved ones, maybe an increase in fear about your financial situation or your job. Maybe you notice a change in your eating or sleeping patterns, or you struggle to concentrate. Often we hear people report a decline in their health, both physical and mental, right after experiencing a trauma. We also often hear that people will increase their use of drugs, alcohol, or other substances when feeling stressed. For sure, that has been a theme and a concern over the last 3 years in many ways. Again, I don't want to say that we are done and we're out of this situation, but hopefully we're shifting and taking some time to reflect and figure out what has been helpful or not helpful for us as we're reacting, responding, and attempting to take care of ourselves. So this next part here, again, lots of reflecting that I'm asking you to do here. Positive first step is for us to recognize our own automatic reactions, responses, reactions to stress. So what do we do without even thinking about it when we're stressed? How do we typically respond? Usually we don't stop and sort of think about it, right? Okay, this is going on. How am I going to react? We just automatically do it. If we can take the time now when perhaps we're not stressed or we're having this session and talking about it and identify some of our immediate responses to stress, then we're more likely to recognize and address them before they create a major life or health concern. So when we're aware of how our bodies, our mind, our behaviors respond to stress, we have the ability to reach out earlier and perhaps decrease that negative impact that I mentioned. It's also helpful to get to know the automatic responses of the people around you. So that might be your family members, or it might even be your coworkers, depending on what your relationship is with them. So then that way, once we know the different ways that people react to stress, it can help us to be more supportive or practice empathy towards others and ourselves. Most of us have automatic physical responses as well as changes in our behaviors and emotions. So here I am again going to put that out for you to think about. Answer the following questions. And again, there are no right or wrong answers here, okay? So what are your automatic reactions to stress? What do you notice, or what do the people around you notice when you're stressed? Again, please share in the chat if you're comfortable. I'll give some examples, if it's within your body, and this is me for sure, is do you get tense shoulders and neck? So I for sure, when I'm stressed, that's what I notice is I'm tense, my shoulders are raising, I get a tension headache, or maybe for some people, they get an upset stomach when they're feeling stressed. With your mind, do you go to that extreme of doom and gloom or start avoiding or isolating yourself? And lastly, a behavior, an example might be to sit on the sofa and eat an entire bag of family-sized chips or to stop exercising, or maybe, you develop, this is another one we've been talking about recently, and today is a good example of that, like some extreme road rage. Is that an indicator for you that you're stressed when you start to really kind of react in those ways? So yeah, Chad, if there's anything in the chat, do you want to share that with me?
Yeah, we had someone note that they are less patient when in those times, so that's certainly understandable. General not well feeling, tense, digestive, darker mood.
Yeah.
So I think that's, yeah.
Absolutely. So really,
oh, sorry, I was just going to note that somebody else just mentioned shut down and just want to cry.
Yeah. Oh, again, did it do that again?
Yep, you're back to me.
Okay, I don't know what's going on there. My apologies. No, it's doing it again.
Oh,
it's just wanting to kick me out.
Yeah, you're in the app again, but back in here. Okay, good to go.
Okay, yeah. So really important again to connect these dots, right? To say, and if we can recognize that, like, oh, this is an indicator that I'm stressed, when I'm irritable, or when I'm, doing this, or I automatically, don't want to make dinner, or whatever that might be an indicator that I'm stressed. So again, no right or wrong answer to that. It's just simply information for you to reflect on and to know about yourself. And that is one of the most powerful tools we have, is reflection, okay, and knowledge. So once you know what those automatic responses are, you can choose what to do with that information. So the next question is, now what, right? What do we do with that information? Now, I think because I'm splitting this up into two sections, I think after this slide, we'll pause and feel free to ask questions, and then we can move on to the next part. But so it is the natural question. You found out, okay, these are my automatic responses. Now, what do I do with that? So some of our current coping strategies, they absolutely may contribute to our health, and others may be a little less healthy. So that might be, again, eating the full family size. It's not a big deal if you eat a full family size bag of chips, by the way, every once in a while, but if it becomes kind of something you do every night, right? You drink a bottle of wine, you eat some chips, you could see how that could end up not being great for you. So, we definitely want to kind of identify the things that are good and the things that are not good, and start to build up some of these healthier things. So the first thing is to be gentle with yourself when you're making changes. This can be hard to do. We might be super excited to make changes and then get really down when we discover that it's harder to make those changes than we thought it would be. So I encourage you and remind you that you are making attempts and movements forward, which can only be a positive thing. And sometimes it takes a few times of attempting something before it sticks, or navigating different ways of doing things. We absolutely are not looking for perfection here. Like I said, you're going to want to take a look what strategies you might want to keep and what strategies don't serve you well. Perhaps you can identify things that work for you and that you decide to keep those ones, and then add some other ones. So there's no need to start from scratch. Take a look at the overall, again, more reflection on the things that are working for you and the things that are not, and start making the changes from there. And then including healthier strategies in your regular routine can help build that resilience, again, that we talked about, manage emotions, and help to alleviate the impact of stress in different situations. So try to make goals that are manageable and take smaller steps towards wellness to guarantee success. So for example, I think physical exercise is a great example of this. It's probably beneficial to start with smaller goals along the way, once or twice a week, rather than planning to exercise and lift heavy weights every day. This is going to give you the chance to feel the benefit of exercise and use those sort of good feelings as motivation to continue the practice and increase it incrementally. Again, if you were to do it every day in super heavy weight, you're probably going to be sore or injure yourself, and then you're going to stop doing it and then feel like you were a failure. So if we're able to celebrate sort of new change and congratulate ourselves on those smaller steps, that's more motivating rather than blaming ourselves or being hard on ourselves when we're not able to achieve that higher goal. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there. My PowerPoint, again, it's not working quite properly today. Next time that we meet, I think it might be in 2 weeks, we're going to review self-care strategies and go into all of the other points that were on the agenda. I'm going to see if I'm not going to, let me see if I can skip down to it doesn't really matter. Just moving to the questions. If there's any questions for today, and again, my apologies that things are not quite working as planned. But again, this is,
we'll blame it on the weather.
Yeah, I was gonna say something, but yeah. So I'll open up to any questions or comments for the first part of the session today around post-traumatic growth.
Sure. We had a question: how do we know when to seek professional help? So that would be, seeking professional help when we're no longer able to regulate back into a healthy state.
Yeah, I think, again, that's where that reflection piece comes in. So whether you're using the mental health continuum model and kind of maybe monitoring a little bit, like, where am I at? I'm trying these different things and I'm not able to shift. Those would be indicators for you that, hey, I might need that extra support. And sometimes we do. Sometimes we can do it on our own by building in healthy habits, talking to people, all of those different things. And we'll get into some of those self-care strategies of things that you can do. But when you're noticing that you're having a hard time shifting, you're staying in that mood or that state, that would be a point where I would say reach out. I will also say, though, there are benefits of reaching out, just as we talked earlier, when we can reflect on what our responses are to stress when we're in a more settled state. There's also a place to reach out and speak with a professional when you're not in that super stressed state, because you can do that work, right? You can say, I'm going to identify my strengths, I'm going to identify where I'm at, and I'm going to talk about how do I know when I'm not doing well. So there's benefits of reaching out for professional support at all different stages. So again, you have EAP benefits, which includes 10 sessions per year. You can reach out at any point. But most definitely when you're finding that you're not heading into more of that, the green and the yellow on that continuum, if you're rarely in that state, I would highly encourage that you do reach out.
I don't see any other questions at the moment, but I would encourage anyone who does have a question to please enter it into the question section. I just would note too, I in the intro I mentioned that the upcoming session is on April 19th, and I was wrong on that. It's actually it's on the 18th. So just wanted to clarify that for everybody. Somebody asked that in the question, so thank you for mentioning that. Just because yeah, we don't want everybody to have the wrong date down. So that's coming up on the 18th, and I did put in the chat area there. I put in where you can go to register if you haven't already done so. So you can click on that link and it'll take you to the registration. And I also added in the link that notes where you can find all the recordings of the booster sessions.
Great. And I just put this slide up with my email address, so feel free to reach out to me if you do have any questions at all. That would be fine.
Somebody's just asking if you could show the continuum again.
Okay, let's see. You'll have to bear with me as I click back on all my slides. I'm happy to do that, but like I said, today is just not as smooth. Lots of clicking here.
While you're doing that, I'll just note we had another question. What can one do if they've reached out and it's not helping? What any thoughts on that?
Well, so with there we go. I'll just land on there. With either talking with your therapist and coming up with a plan with them on what to do next, it may be consulting with your doctor. So sometimes people, again, they're trying everything that they can. They're working through a bunch of different self-care strategies. They're exploring, the different reasons that they might be feeling the way they are. There could end up being situations where you might want to speak to a doctor, possibly see a psychiatrist to see whether or not depression might be playing a role there, and then your doctor would talk to you about options around that, which may include medication. I will say also within your EAP plan, so not only do you have counseling, but part of what is available, which a lot of people don't realize, is that we do have consulting psychiatrists who work with us. So in working with your therapist, if you decide with your therapist that this would be a good next step, you could have an assessment or a review of your current medication with a psychiatrist. So we have a child psychiatrist, an adult psychiatrist, and then a psychiatrist who works within our addictions management program. So there are times where meeting with your therapist in that plan, it might include reaching out to your doctor as a next step.
Great. So we also had another question. How should we approach someone who we feel may be in that injured phase? What type of language would we use in those scenarios?
Yeah, that's a great question. And back to me encouraging people to reflect on and sort of identify what their automatic responses to stress are. Having those conversations with your loved ones or your coworkers, if they have shared that with you. So if they had said, I know this is how I respond when I'm stressed or when I'm not doing well, and you notice that in them, because you had that conversation to start with and they've shared with you, like, hey, let's use the road rage as an example. When I'm really stressed and I'm not doing well, my road rage is off the charts and I find myself snapping at people all over the place. That might give you permission to point that out to them. Hey, remember when we had that conversation and you said this was an indicator that you're not doing well? If they've shared that with you, you could bring that back and say, so like, how are you doing? Because this is something you shared with me before. So that's why these conversations are great to have with the people that you're close with. It almost gives you permission to have that conversation rather than, again, a reaction saying like, what's going on with you, right? Maybe more of a judgment or a judgmental response to them. So I would encourage, again, to use this continuum to have conversations with people. The more we do that, the more we reduce stigma, the more we can talk about it and support each other.
Okay, great.
And
Not seen any other.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Chad, that you can also speak with your therapist. If you have a therapist, you can speak to your therapist to like, hey, give me some ideas on what to say, how to support my friend or family member. Even if you call our intake line and speak to our intake workers, leader consults are another place where I often have leaders come to me to talk about those things. I have an employee I'm worried about. How do I bring this up? I'm happy to have those conversations and give ideas around wording or maybe not like a script where we want you to sound like a robot, but just some ideas on how you can approach people. So feel free to reach out to professionals to have that conversation too. I'm worried about somebody. How do I approach them?
Excellent. No, that's good advice, because it's never an easy bridge to cross to make those initial steps for sure. So I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment, and we're right at 12:30, so perfect timing. So we'll end things there, and I'll just note again that the upcoming session is on April 18th, and if you haven't registered, there is a link in the chat, and then there is also a link that is available on the health providers page that I had noted as well. So again, that's in the health providers section of the Shared Health website, and we're under the mental health and wellness tab. So again, those are opportunities there. So we encourage everybody to join us again in right around 2 weeks time, I guess it is.
Great.
Okay, well, thanks again, Carmel, for your presentation. Thank you to everybody who joined us, and hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.